Hello friends, greetings from our coaching classes. So today's topic for class 9 is the fundamental unit of life, chapter 5. So this is part 1 of the video. So let us start with this. Now all of you must have studied in previous class, that is in class 8, about cells. We know that cell is a Latin word for a little room. It was discovered by who? Robert Hooke in 1665. All of us are familiar with his picture. And what did he observe? He observed cork cells. Okay, he observed thin slice of cork in which he saw some honeycomb-like structures. Right? This was his handmade microscope. Okay. Now, honeycomb-like structures. Okay. If you can imagine a beehive, you will see several honeycombs in it. Right? Now, each hexagon, this hexagonal structure, is kind of a room for a bee. So you can see here honeycomb-like structures. Then why did he call them as cell? Cell means what? Little room. So it was also looking like several cells in a monastery. And what is monastery? Where monks stay, right? So this is one of the most famous monastery in the world, that is known as Rila Monastery in Bulgaria. So note numerous small rooms which are present over here, right? So in these small rooms, these monks used to live and they used to pray. So cell is what? A Latin word for a little room, right? So these are nothing but cells of a monastery. These are what? Cells of a plant sample. So he observed a thin slice of cork under the microscope and he observed several cell-like structures or room-like structures in it, which he called as cells, right? Okay. Now we know that cell is a Latin word for a little room. We also know from our previous class that all living organisms are made up of a fundamental unit called as cell. It is the basic structural and functional unit of life or living organisms. It is also known as the fundamental unit of life. That is the name of this chapter, right? Cell is termed as a structural unit of life as it provides structure to an organism's body. Okay, it is providing structure to an organism's body, just like wall is made up of different bricks. So if you arrange bricks in a proper fashion, you may get different shapes in a wall, right? Okay. Now cell is considered as a functional unit of life as all the functions of the body take place at the cellular level. What are the functions that are occurring in our body? Like for example digestion, respiration. Okay, these kind of functions or processes that are occurring in our body, they also occur at the individual cells level. That is known as what? Cellular level. So cell is also considered as a functional unit of life, right? Okay. Now you must have done this experiment so many times. Okay, it is there in your lab manual also. Onion peel under the microscope. If you take a thin peel of onion and try to observe it under microscope, so you will see structures like this. These are nothing but what? Cells in an onion peel. Okay. Now, depending upon what kind of stain that you are using, they may appear blue. If you are using methylene blue, or violet if you are using crystal violet. If you are using stain such as saffronin, they may appear reddish. Okay, all right. But what you will see, these kind of structures. Okay, these are nothing but cells, right? Okay. Now we know that Robert Hooke in 1665, he for the first time observed cells and he coined the term cells for these kind of structures. Okay, these are units. Like Just like bricks are unit of a wall, these cells are unit of an entire organism. In 1831, Robert Brown was able to identify these kind of structures in the cells, and these are nothing but what? Nuclei. Nuclei is plural for nucleus. This dense body, okay, inside a cell is known as what? Nucleus. It was first discovered by Robert Brown in 1831. So as you can see, this is microscope. When we say microscope in today's world, we imagine these kind of things, right? It was very primitive at the time of Robert Hooke's time. So there were several technological advances in the microscopes, okay, in the design and construction of microscopes. Nowadays, you have electron microscopes, so you can magnify up to several lakh times, okay, and be, because of the discovery of electron microscope, several other components of the cell were discovered, okay. So cell, it functions because of several components that are present inside it, and these components may not be visible very clearly using these kind of microscope, but they are very clearly visible using advanced technology and advanced microscopes like electron microscopes, right? Okay, meanwhile there was another guy named as Leeuwenhoek. Okay, his name was Leeuwenhoek in 1674. So he made some interesting discovery. What was that? Let us try to understand. Okay, all right. Anton von Leeuwenhoek. Okay, he was a Dutch lens grinder. Lens grinder means what? The one who used to make lenses. His actual profession or his actual work was he used to deal with curtains and drapery. So he needed to check the fibers or threads which are required for making these curtains, drapery, etc. So for this, he developed an hobby. He developed a hobby to grind lenses, means to make lenses, so that he can observe these fibers or threads very clearly. So he was very inquisitive. So he's developed a very nice microscope. For that time, this was very advanced microscope. Okay, and he was the first person to observe microorganisms, free living cells in pond water. So he started taking samples from different places and he started putting them on this tip, and he used to observe from the other side. So this lens was so powerful, so he could observe these microorganisms. Leeuwenhoek discovered protozoa, the single-celled organisms. He called them as animalcules. He also improved the microscope and laid foundation for microbiology. He is often cited as the first microbiologist to study muscle fibers, bacteria, etc. So these single-celled organisms which are freely living in water or in environment, he was the first person to observe this. Okay, all right. Now we come to the next concept, that is known as cell theory. Now, cell theory is one of the basic principles of biology, which was proposed by Schleiden and Schwann, and which was later expanded by Virchow. Matthias Schleiden, Theodor Schwann, and Rudolf Virchow. All these were German scientists. So what does this cell theory say? Let us try to understand. Very important. Cell theory states that all living organisms are composed of cells. So let it be any kind of organism. Let it be amoeba, let it be bacterium, let it be paramecium, let it be your plant, let it be animal, tiger, human being, any kind of living organisms. In fact, all living organisms are composed of cells. Second, as we all know, cell is the basic or fundamental unit of life. Okay. Now, the third one is also very important. All new cells come from pre-existing cells. Now, what does this mean? All the new cells come from pre-existing cells. Now, we have learned in physics that everything around you is matter, is made up of some matter. Similarly, our body is like made up of some matter. Human body contains almost 70% water, right? So cell also contains some water, some proteins, some cell organelles, right? There are some lipids, nutrients, etc., minerals. All these things are present inside a cell. Now, if I take all these things separately and put them in a beaker, will I get cell? Obviously not. So this means that a new cell is always formed from its parent cell, okay? Also known as what? Pre-existing cell. Cell on its own doesn't form from other non-living materials, right? Clear? Okay. So there has to be a parent cell to give rise to new cell. This is also known as what? Daughter cells. Okay. So all the new cells will come from the pre-existing cells. All right. So this was about the cell theory. Very important. Now, types of organisms on the basis of number of cells. Unicellular organisms and multicellular organisms. Now, what are unicellular organisms? The organisms, uni means one. Uni means what? One. The organisms that are made up of single cell and constitute a whole organism are named as unicellular organisms. Means what? A single cell forms entire organism. The entire body of a given organism is made up of only one cell or single cell. Those are known as what? Unicellular organisms. For example, amoeba, paramecium, irregular shape, amoeba, slipper type of shape, paramecium. These are protozoans. Then bacteria, very small. Bacteria are very small compared to these protozoans. Okay, salmonella. Salmonella typhi causes typhoid fever. Okay, chlamydomonas. This is kind of algae, single cell. Okay, then yeast. Okay, yeast cells. These are what? Single-celled organisms, or also known as what? Unicellular organisms. So organization of cells in the body. So entire body is made up of only one cell. All right. Okay. Then there are multicellular organisms. The organisms which are composed of several groups of cells. Several groups of cells that assume a function in coordinated manner. Okay. With different cells specialized to perform particular tasks in a body are known as multicellular organisms. So examples are what? Plants, human beings, different animals, etc. These are all what? Multicellular organisms, right? So we have what? Several cells, they come together to form tissues. Several tissues come together to form similar kind of tissues. They come together to form an organ. Then we have organ systems, and then we have an entire organism, right? So multicellular. So they assume function in a coordinated manner. So there is some coordination between all these cells. Nervous system, organ system, brain is there, spinal cord is there, nerve cells are there. Okay, they are working in a coordinated fashion, right? Then your digestive system. What are the organs in digestive system? Right, your food canal. Then some of the organs are stomach, intestine. Okay, they are working in a coordinated manner. And how they are made? They are made from several tissues, and these tissues are in turn made up of cells, right? So cell is a basic structural and functional unit of life, let it be in multicellular organisms or unicellular organisms. In case of unicellular organisms, all these functions of organs and organ systems are performed inside a single cell only, right? Okay. Now, shapes and size of cells. Okay. Now, cells vary in shape and size. You can have several different kinds of shapes. okay, and sizes also. The shape may be oval, spherical, rectangular, spindle shaped, or totally irregular like a nerve cell. Okay. The size of cells also varies in different organisms, right? So last year I had told you that this diagram of nerve cell, okay, you may have a simplified version of this. You have to remember till your class 10th, class 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, you have to remember this kind of diagram for the nerve cell, right? Most of the cells are microscopic, like red blood cells, okay, RBCs. Some cells are fairly large, like nerve cells, okay, but they are so thin that sometimes they are invisible to an unaided eye. Even though cell is very big, it may be very big, but it may not be visible to naked eyes, okay, because of thinness, right? Now RBCs, okay, does it look like a donut with incomplete hole, right? There is a depression. So RBCs look like this, okay, because before they come into circulation, nucleus is removed from them. Why it is done, we'll see in some other chapter. Okay, then muscle cells, spindle shape, right? Amoeba, irregular shape. Adipocyte, what do you mean by adipocyte? The fat storing cells, right? Or the fat cells. Here oils or fats are stored, right? These are what? Bacterial cells. Okay, bacteria may have different shapes, right? Okay, now why this variety is there? Why do cells assume or they have different kinds of shape and sizes? Okay, very important. The shape and size of cells are related to the specific function they perform. So it depends on specific function they are performing. Some cells like amoeba have changing shape, right? So amoeba will send out its pseudopodia, and it can capture food or it can move from one place to another, right? In some cases, shape could be more or less fixed, like we have seen in the onion peel cell, right? More or less fixed shape is there, and peculiar for a particular type of cell. For example, nerve cell have a typical shape. Okay, there is cell body, then there is axon, then there are dendrites, etc. Right? There are dendrites, neurons, and all this stuff. Right? So this is what their function is to what? Receive signal and transfer it. Okay. So this may be a very long. This axon may be very long. So it depends on their function, right? The shape and size depends on their function. Muscle cells, they have continuous function for contraction, relaxation, etc. And for this, they may be elongated or they have spindle shape, right? Then RBCs, somewhat like discs, okay, donut. The hole is not complete in the donut, so depression is there, and they are flattened. So they are very small. Why? They have to carry oxygen, right? With the help of what? Hemoglobin. They have to carry oxygen with the help of hemoglobin to different parts of the body, and that's why they have to travel through so many small capillaries, etc. And this is the reason why they are small and disc-like, somewhat flat. Okay, so it always depends. The shape and size of the cells always depend on the specific function they are performing. Okay, all right. The next part is cell organelles and components. Cell, we know that it is termed as structural unit of life as it provides to structure to an organism's body. This is clear. Then cell is also considered as functional unit of life as all the functions of body take place at the cellular level. Okay. Each living cell has capacity to perform certain basic functions that are characteristic of all living forms. So every living cell has its own machinery, has its own capacity to do some basic functions like respiration, growth, division, etc. Okay, of the living forms, right? Now, how does a living cell perform all these basic functions? So how does it perform? Who tells us? We know that if I want to do something, my brain will give me a signal that okay, now speak. So I'm speaking with you guys, right? Now my brain gives me function, okay, move this cursor, right? So I am thinking, then my hand is moving, and similarly, this is coordinated. But some of the basic functions, respiration or involuntary functions, respiration, digestion, etc. How does a cell perform all these functions? Okay. So, just like organs have specific function in a multicellular complex organism's body, each cell has specific components. Each cell has what? Specific components in it that perform specific functions. These components are known as organelles. So what are organelles? So specific components present in cells that perform specific functions are known as what? Organelles. Just like organs in our body, each organelle contributes in its own way to helping the cell function as a whole. So each organelle has its own function inside cell, just like each organ has its own function in our body. For example, heart has function of pumping the blood. Okay, lungs, gaseous exchange, stomach, digestion. So each organ has specific function, right? Similarly, the components in a cell, there are several components in a cell which we are going to see in detail. So those are known as organelles. Okay, this can be viewed as tiny organs of a cell. So these organelles perform specific functions, and these components are known as what? Organelles, right? Okay, so this was the end of part 1. Stay tuned for part 2. If you have any doubts, please write in the comment box. I will try to answer those doubts. Please like the video and stay tuned for part 2. Thank you.